Good morning, you're watching News 9. I'm Shweta Kothari. On the show today, we will talk about EU-India trade talks as EU delegation advances in India to meet ministers as well as Prime Minister today. All that and more will be discussed by us on the show. Joining us will be Srinath Sridharan as well as Barnik Choitran Moitro at Morning Brief at 9. And you're watching Morning Brief at 9. Our top stories at this hour. European Union Commission President arrives in India for a landmark 2-day visit. Prime Minister Modi to hold a delegation-level talks with President Ursula von der Leyen on Friday, which is today. Bilateral ministerial meetings between European commissioners and their Indian counterparts also on the cards. NSO, the National Statistics Office, to release annual GDP numbers for financial year 24-25, along with quarterly GDP number estimates for October to December quarter of financial year 24 and 25. SBI research estimates GDP to grow at 6.2 to 6.3% for third quarter of financial year 25 and the annual GDP to grow at 6.3%. Finance Secretary Tuhin Kanta Pandey appointed the new SEBI chairman. The 1987 batch IAS officer from Odisha cadre will replace Madhvipuri BUCH, whose 3-year tenure will end on 28th of Feb, which is today. Delhi High Court directs Amazon to pay as much as 340 crore rupees to luxury brand Beverly Hills Polo Club for trademark infringement, remarking that Amazon's actions amounted to deliberate and willful infringement. Swedish furniture giant IKEA to launch e-commerce services in Delhi-NCR and 9 other cities across North India, including in UP, Punjab, starting 1st of March. The launch follows inauguration of Retail Majors Distribution Centre in Gurugram, which will fulfill same-day deliveries in Delhi-NCR. Union Civil Aviation Minister inaugurates the UDAAN YATRI Cafe at Chennai Airport. The cafe aims to provide affordable food options to travellers with prices starting as low as 20 rupees. And Indian authorities are said to be exploring ways to lower tariffs on a wide range of imports, including cars and chemicals. A report on government says that government is acting swiftly to evade US President Donald Trump's threat of reciprocal levies. And Meta on Thursday apologized for an error that led to multiple user Instagram reel feeds filling up with violent and graphic videos. The company said it has resolved the issue. The apology came after several social media users complained of violent and not safe for work content in Reels feed. Nearly 100 crore Indians, which is 90% of country's population, lack discretionary spending powers to purchase goods and services, according to venture capital firm Bloom Ventures. The top 10% of India's population remains primary driver for consumption and economic growth. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Our top story at this hour: India and the European Union are set to push forward for a long-awaited free trade agreement or FTA, with top leaders meeting in the national capital today. The high-level talks come amid growing global trade tensions, especially after US President Donald Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on the EU. Now, European Union President Ursula von der Leyen arrived in India on Thursday, joined by 20 commissioners in a significant diplomatic show of strength. The delegation will meet Prime Minister Modi today and key cabinet ministers to discuss trade, investment investment and economic cooperation. The two-day visit of Ursula von der Leyen to India has brought back focus on the proposed free trade agreement between the two, and the talks for which were, remember, relaunched back in June of 2022. The talks between the two sides, which is India and EU, were first launched in 2007, were frozen in 2013 because of lack of progress, and are now once again resuming at a very fast clip. What is in store as far as India-EU relationship is concerned? Let's talk about that. Joining us on the show is Barnik Chitran Moitra, is a PE investor, managing partner at Chrysalis Equity Ventures. Also with us is Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor. Gentlemen, good morning. It is an important day for India and its trade ties with EU, with a host of delegation here, commissioners of the EU visiting India on a landmark visit. I want to come to you, Srinath, first. You've spoken about how important this trip of Ursula is for India. It is a move now by EU to really try and get India on its good sides.
Good morning, Shweta. Yes, indeed. Suddenly, the long-lost friend India is now the new hope for a lot of countries. I mean, why only EU? We have UK suddenly also reviving the conversation of FTA, which has been pending for quite some time. So I think we must be thankful to President Trump for making this possible. I mean, end of the day is transactional diplomacy is driving a lot of these forward. Newer geopolitical blocks, newer trade blocks, and newer arrangements to secure their own balance of trade policies. I think that's what it is. But importantly, can India then kind of drive a hard bargain to ensure that its strategic interests in Europe and UK are also protected? I think that's going to be the larger challenge, considering EU wants a lot of trade incentives, including reducing tariffs on automobiles and alcohol, especially wines, and Indian alcohol industry also faces challenges when it tries to export to the EU. So I think the jury is out. But the other context that I want to discuss probably later in the segment is this. The EU is very, very clear about its regulations around AI, which is very different from the US model and the Chinese model. India yet doesn't have a AI regulatory model at all.
Right.
So will this have an impact on that and the GDPR, especially the data protection, and how will it peg with the Indian digital protection bill?
All right, those will be some of the important points to discuss perhaps later in the show today. Let me quickly also get in Barnik on the show. Barnik, as Srinath pointed out, this is a strategy here by the EU to ensure that it finds a partner in India. The talks, which was frozen so far, did not really move forward, seem to be moving forward at a very fast pace today. It is also a likely indication of the changing global world order, where both, EU as well as the UK are now hoping and looking for new partners.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. If you look at the numbers, India's largest trading partner is the European Union. We trade roughly $120 to $130 billion of goods with them every year, whereas India is European Union's only 9th largest trading partner. In addition to the geopolitics around the US and what the Trump presidency is doing to global trade, one of the most important strategic rationale for the European Union to come back to the table with India is their increased reliance on China, which they want to now get away from, right? So in addition to the US, there's a big China question which is looming, I think, large at these talks. The European Union strategically wants to actually import more from India so that they reduce the reliance on China, while the other measures of reducing tariff barriers for them to export more goods, particularly spirits and automobiles, are an important sticking point, right? In addition to this, there are several important parameters: data security, carbon adjustment, cross-border adjustment mechanism. There is the issue on IP and GDPR, which need to be negotiated. So it's not a very simple negotiation to do, because the Europeans are fairly rigid on their laws and standards. So significant concessions will have to be given for the Indians to open up their market more for European imports.
And I want to come back to you, Srinath, at this point in time. It's also important to understand in the larger context of what's really happening geopolitically, and you've talked about it. how Trump's second presidency is changing the world as we know it today. There is, of course, a push and pull strategy vis-a-vis China, whether China is going to be an important import partner for UK and EU. But with the kind of thrust that we've seen on talks with India, it does look like it's going to be a pivot away from China, at least in the next 4 years, and perhaps that will be what will shape global trade.
Shweta, I think while China is the elephant in the room, the reality is can a lot of these countries, the European countries and the US step back away from China? I mean, I kind of doubt it. For the simple fact, China is their outsourced manufacturer for almost everything. So while China has made its intent clear about IP, intellectual property, that it will not give in or it will pull away from all these partners, the reality is, if you remember, during COVID, we all said that the global supply chains will be reset considering the worries around China and COVID, and nothing has happened so far. So I think a lot of these are more transactional, and it won't be amiss to say that end of the day, all these leaders are politicians by nature. They have to win over the domestic constituents. I mean, they don't have to worry about the 10-year plan, but they have to worry about the next domestic election that they have to win and retain power. So whatever works, they will have to balance both of this. So let's not get carried away by thinking that they're going to save the world or do a bilateral deal which is going to hold in a good stead for the next 20 years. Whatever rhetorics and sound bites that work for them the next year for the next election in their hometown is what most of them work. And I think that's the nature of transactional politics, which is accentuated by the loud proclamations that President Trump does. I mean, that's a reality. Everybody else tries to camouflage it in diplomatic political speak.
Absolutely, and it's a reality, I think, which we are very aware of, at least in the last couple of weeks. Barney, coming back to you, I think a few key agendas on discussion on the table today would be, of course, discussions around import duties on wine, automobile, chemicals. Where do you think India is likely to concede?
I think there will be concessions provided, because if you look at the trade imbalance, India actually imports far more, right, or exports far more to Europe than we import from Europe, right? So if you look at what the government has also hinted when it comes to similar tariff relief given to other countries like UK and Europe, right, there will be, I think, concessions given on several of these parameters. I think what I heard also is that the demands made by the European Union, I think the Indian delegation is probably nearly 90% there on acceding to some of the demands on lower tariffs for some of these industries, particularly wines and automobiles, particularly high-end automobiles and also electric vehicles. So I think from that side, I think there is fair flexibility. There are far more stickier points beyond just tariffs. There's a broader point of the bilateral investment treaty, which I think India is far more interested in inking because of the potential of FDI from European Union to India. There, I think there are far more difficult topics to talk about, particularly the entire philosophy which the Indian government has for international investors to first exhaust all kind of recourse to local courts before going to international arbitration, whereas all international investors, particularly from European Union, would prefer international arbitration as step one, right? So I don't think there will be a lot of thorny negotiations on tariff per se, because India is anyway going to be reducing that in light of what the US is also doing. And it's very hard to tell your leading trading partner, which is European Union, why you have a far more favorable import tariff regime towards the US and towards the European Union. So I think there's a secular trend to anyway reduce it. We don't earn a lot of, I would say, income from these tariffs, right? And a lot of these industries, except for whiskies and malts, we don't have a local industry which is large enough for us to be threatened by importing a lot of these things, particularly wines and other spirits. So I think on tariffs is the easier part of the negotiation, but there are far more stickier parts, particularly when it comes to Indian exports and agriculture and other areas, which would be far more difficult to negotiate.
All right. I want to talk about those stickier points as well, but coming back to you, Srinath, I think among other engagements would, of course, be, as you rightly pointed at the beginning, around digital technology, AI, semiconductor, which is where I think both India and EU are on different chapters on what would constitute AI regulation, data privacy laws, and that is perhaps where both need to sit at a table and really negotiate on what's the way ahead.
Yeah, I mean, as Barnik said, I think the regulations are the tougher one. The regulations and the compliance. I mean, AI or data protection is one. What about the carbon compliance and MSME exporters out of India go through a lot of paperwork, and the compliance to EU regulations is almost one time consuming, is very, very expensive as well. And most cases we may not even meet it. So some of those standing down as a negotiating tactic is what India would expect EU to do across all regulations. If they're going to say that they're going to give not just tariff but also access to the market, I think it has to be easier access, call it ease of doing business, so to speak. And I don't think that will come through very, very easily, Shweta. That's a concern.
Okay.
How do you move a large conversation, which is an emerging topic itself, AI or even data protection, to evolve? If you remember, EU and India have been fighting over even the market regulations, right? I mean, we've been saying the entire markets, how do you market, and SEBI has been pushing back the EU. And some of these take long period of time, and the nature of, I think, the judicial intervention in institutional markets like the EU, even let's say if one of them take a call, one of the large banks or corporates could also actually take them to court, saying that it is actually infringing on their right to doing business. So how will this pan out? In India, it's very different, right? If you have almost a constitutional authority, the government taking the call, most of the corporates slow down and they don't go to the judicial authorities. That's the challenge. How do you actually get a buy-in from the corporate EU? It's not just about the government EU. Okay. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to hear that voice.
All right, whether corporate EU is going to be in tandem with what the government EU says and promises to do as far as their engagement with India is concerned. But coming back to you, Barnik, let's talk about some of those sticky points. And you rightly pointed out, exports is where I think India will have to bargain, negotiate harder, especially when it comes to agriculture as well.
Yeah, so listen, there are three major sticking points. Let's start with agriculture. Europe has very stringent rule of origin laws where all agricultural exports need to be labeled, and you have to provide traceability on the origin as well as the kind of processing you're doing for agricultural exports. In addition to that, there are country-specific regulations on quality, on the use of pesticides and fertilizers, which have to be declared and labeled accordingly, which becomes a huge, I would say, burden on exporters to just comply with those norms. Second issue, as you mentioned, is the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which effectively renders a 25% tax or tariff on most goods originating from India, right? So that just makes a lot of these exports uncompetitive, right? When I think the European Union moves to application of CBAM later this year, immediately a lot of the Indian goods exports will come under the ambit of this tax, right? It just makes it quite uncompetitive versus exports from other countries which are more compliant on carbon emissions. The third issue, which was also pointed out, is on GDPR and IT compliance, right, where a lot of software and technology exports in India, right, have to be compliant with GDPR, which make the issue far more complicated from a compliance point of view. The only additional twist in the tail is while we are negotiating with the European Union Commissioner, each country have their own flavor of application of these regulations, which say countries like Belgium and France, where the application is far more stringent, right, to other eastern members of the Union where the application is less stringent. Okay. So while a framework agreement may be, we may come across that given the impetus, whether that will remove the local burden, the French regulation when applied on these three topics, or even the Belgian regulation as a country-specific regulation, is another reasonably thorny issue which has to be sorted through. And at the end of the day, the Indians or the Indian side will be willing to give a lot of concessions on domestic market access and tariffs only when they get similar concessions on regulations from the European Union.
All right, and before I let you go, gentlemen, Srinath, to you first. I think it's a good show for India. With the entire European Union commissioners, a delegation as strong as that, headed by President of EU Ursula von der Leyen in India, meeting Prime Minister, meeting and engaging with various ministries. It's a good show. It goes on to tell you that India is formidable economically today, and one cannot really ignore India as companies look to move out of China. At the same time, you also wrote about how UK is also going hammer and tongs in trying to solidify its partnership with India. Who's going to have the first movers advantage here?
So I think whoever treats India better than just being a consumption market. I think if they can look at India as a collaborative partner and a strategic partner, I think India will budge. I think if they're going to look at only a consumption market, then we would be better off being a transaction market of sorts. So I think that's a tougher one. And I think if you look at it, UK has a political problem. It has not had a stable leader for very, very long. EU, to get all of the stakeholders to agree on something is a challenge. And we've seen how during the Ukraine-Russia war, Germany bought oil through India and stuff like that. So everybody speaks a lot of things around governance, but when it comes to their own domestic vulnerabilities, take the easy route out. So long-term, net-net, can they stay the course? I think that's a challenge. EU, UK, I think India should do what I call the trident model. Work with both of them, because India is the shortest route to EU, from EU to UK. I mean, look at it that way.
Okay, the trident relationship. There's political will here, Barnik. There is a lot of political will here. Whether that will translate into some sort of quick policy movement, do you believe that a EU-India free trade agreement and a UK-India free trade agreement could take shape perhaps in the next year or so?
No, I am, I think, positively and even cautiously optimistic, right? Because the scenario is different. I think if you note, this European Union free trade agreement has been in the works for nearly a decade, right? There were 14 rounds of negotiations in 2013 to 15, and I think we are already in round 10 or round 12 this time, right? But the seriousness is different. One of the other elephants in the room we did not talk about was actually Russia. And I think there is an expectation that given how, again, Trump's America seems to have kept the European Union out of the Ukraine negotiations and the peace negotiations, that there's a role India could play. So if you look at both UK and Europe, I think the need for them to do a free trade agreement with India far outweighs India's need to do it, at least from a strategic and geopolitical interest. And the need is greater than ever, than anywhere in the last decade. So I'm very cautiously optimistic that within probably end of this calendar year, if not early next year, we will see free trade agreements with both these important trading partners inked.
All right, early next year or maybe this year, I think that's the hope there as far as free trade agreements with both these formidable partners is concerned. Srinath Sridharan, Barnik Chitran Moitra, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on that very crucial story. And shifting focus now, India's Finance Secretary Tuhin Kanta Pandey has been appointed as the 11th chairperson of the capital market regulator, the SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, for a 3-year term. The seasoned finance bureaucrat will replace Madhvi Puri BUCH as SEBI chief, who will complete her 3 years tenure as SEBI's first woman chairperson today. Now, Pandey will take over as the head of the market watchdog while Indian stock market, remember, is experiencing bearish pressure following persistent withdrawals in funds by both foreign institutional investors as well as DIIs of late. Remember, FPIs, or the foreign portfolio investors, have so far withdrawn over 1 lakh crore rupees since January of 2025. The 1987 IAS officer is the senior officer in Ministry of Finance handling Department of Revenue. Pandey was the longest serving secretary in the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, the DIPAM, a department in Finance Ministry that manages government equity in public sector companies as well as Department of Public Enterprises. He takes over as SEBI chief starting 1st of March. Time now for a short break. We'll be back with more news and stories on the other side. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
मैं और आप एक जैसे ही तो हैं। एक बार मंजिल दिख जाए,
One shot of a century,
तो उसे पाने के लिए हम अपने कदमों को नहीं रोकते।
that looks out.
पर कभी-कभी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच रह जाता है एक फासला। खैर, मुझे उस फासले को मिटाने के लिए थोड़ी और मेहनत लगेगी, पर शुक्र है आपके पास है टाटा कैपिटल, जो मिटाए फासले आपकी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच। टाटा कैपिटल, मिटाए फासले।
है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
What does it take to be the greatest in the world? Perseverance, dedication, self-confidence. But there is one thing which truly sets you apart. Your inner strength. Sodium DMD Rebar. True inner strength.
He said AMD is not about performance. It's the oh my god feeling that you get from this brand.
It's people like you and me who have short attention span.
The moment you bring the blah there or any fluff, the customer attention span is gone.
Actually, I shouldn't have asked this question to you. Everybody would be like, how do I get this guy's job? Because he gets to drive the first Mercedes for the first hand. What is the one thing about your job that you hate the most?
We have close to 600 million out of the 1.4 billion in our country who are under the age of 25, and 65% of our population is under 35.
We all know that if you have a choice of pilot at Air India, and one has read the book, the other one has saw the TikTok movie, and the third one has went through a simulator wins, right?
The employable youth is only increasing. We are one of the youngest nations in terms of skilled talent.
There is a mismatch in cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad.
How do you impart a pedagogy where students are just not sleeping inside the class, which is typically the case in the best of business schools as well as undergrad colleges in India? Because a lot of what is being taught in the classes, students don't find that applicable in the real world.
I find it extremely difficult to hire people because you don't get right skills.
This and more streaming on News 9 Plus. Download now. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's take a quick look at how markets have opened this morning. And it's a sea of red yet again, with Nifty 50 down 0.94%, almost 1%, very close to the 22,330 mark at 332. Sensex down more than 1% at 73,861 mark. Mid cap and small cap taking a beating yet again. Mid cap down 1.22% at 48,536. Small cap down 1.14% at 14,984. India VIX is up at 2.17%. India is witnessing a heavy sell-off today, as has been continuing for many sessions now. The sell-off has been exacerbated by what we are seeing globally as far as Nvidia's results is concerned. The underwhelming results of Nvidia has resulted in US sell-off, and that sentiment has now been reflected in Indian markets as well as the Asian markets. Both Nifty and Sensex down almost 1% this morning. And this after a flattish close on Thursday, with Nifty closed marginally lower and Sensex was up marginally at 0.01%. Shifting focus now, India's economy is expected to have grown between 6.3 to 6.5% in the December quarter, while the government is set to release the official GDP data today. Now, in the same quarter last year, GDP growth stood at 8.6%, but since then, the economy has been on a downward trend, slipping to 5.4% in the previous quarter, which is the Q2 of financial year FY25. The slowdown is largely due to weaker consumption, particularly in the rural areas. However, experts say that there could be signs of recovery with expected boost in consumer spending and capital expenditure. GDP could grow and stabilize to around 6.5% on a year average. Now, brokerage firms, including Nomura, have forecasted a lower than expected growth rate of 5.8%, citing mixed trends across key sectors, while agriculture, construction and financial services are showing signs of resilience Trade, hospitality and transportation remain sluggish. So while for Q3, the growth rate could be about 6.2 to 6.5%, for overall financial year 25, growth rate projected and expected to be at about 6.3%. The numbers will be released by NSO later today. And moving on now, trouble is mounting for Amazon as the Delhi High Court has ordered the e-commerce giant to pay a massive 340 crore rupees, which is about $39 million in damages to lifestyle equities after ruling that Amazon infringed upon Beverly Hills Polo Club trademark. Now, the judgment was delivered by Justice Pratibha M. Singh yesterday, and details are awaited, but the case, remember, dates back to 2020 when Lifestyle Equities sued Amazon Technologies and others for allegedly selling apparels and other products with a deceptively similar mark and similar trademark. The court granted an interim injunction barring Amazon from using the infringing logo. However, Amazon did not appear in court, leading to an ex parte ruling against it. Now, Cloudtail India, which was also involved in the case, admitted to selling the infringing products between 2015 to 2020, but failed to reach a settlement through mediation. With this ruling, Amazon now faces one of its biggest trademark-related penalties in India, a penalty of 340 crore rupees. The legal battle, as I mentioned, began in 2020 with the Beverly Hills Polo Club alleging and accusing Amazon of allowing third-party counterfeit product sellers to operate on its platform. And shifting focus now, in a highly anticipated move for furniture lovers, Swedish furniture giant IKEA will launch an e-commerce service in Delhi-NCR and 9 other cities across North India, including UP and Punjab, starting 1st of March. The launch follows the inauguration of Retail Major's distribution center in Gurugram earlier this week, which will fulfill same-day deliveries in both Delhi NCR. So you can order and you will get your furniture delivered by IKEA within the day. 7 years after its India entry, IKEA is set to deliver products ordered online to its customers in North India, which is in addition to Delhi NCR, including Agra, Amritsar, Chandigarh, Jaipur, Kanpur, Lucknow, Ludhiana, among others. Now, so far, IKEA has only onboarded about 1 lakh members from Delhi NCR to its loyalty program, roughly 4% of its 27 lakh loyalty members all throughout the country. The company expects a surge in loyalty members from Delhi NCR and North in days to come. And Union Minister for Civil Aviation inaugurated the UDAAN YATRI Cafe at Chennai Airport. The UDAAN YATRI Cafe is a passenger-friendly cafe where you can order tea for as little as 10 rupees, while other outlets inside the facility sell the same beverages at a price which is exorbitant. For all those who are tired of paying exorbitant money to buy simple things like tea, coffee, samosa at airports, UDAAN YATRI Cafe will come to rescue. Opened at Chennai Airport, strategically located in the pre-checked area of T1 domestic terminal, the cafe offers all connected passengers access to hygienic refreshments like water bottle at 10 rupees, tea at 10 rupees, coffee at 20 rupees, samosa for 20 rupees and sweet of the day for 20 rupees only. The first UDAAN YATRI Cafe, remember, was started in December of 2024 at Kolkata Airport. Now, following high passenger demand, the concept is also being expanded countrywide. The UDAAN YATRI Cafe will shortly open in Delhi Airport as well. Let's now shift focus to other top stories we are tracking around the world. US President Donald Trump says 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada will take effect from 4th of March, threatens additional 10% duty on Chinese goods. And Trump says US will announce 25% tariffs on European cars and other goods soon. EU vows immediate response. India lowers tariffs on American bourbon from 150 to 100%, boosting US whiskey distillers in India. Trump says US and UK are working on a trade deal as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer pushes back on tariffs and urges more military support for Ukraine. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to visit US to finalize a rare earth minerals deal as Trump pushes for a swift end to the Ukraine war. Russian President Vladimir Putin warns Western elites against undermining US-Russia rapprochement, says early talks with new American administration shows promise. And Wall Street tumbles as Nvidia's 8.5% plunge wipes out $274 billion, dragging tech stocks Nasdaq to biggest drop in a month. Luxury car maker Mercedes-Benz to cut jobs in China as part of plans to slash workforce costs by 25% in its largest market by 2027. Rolls-Royce raises mid-term profit targets as cost-saving measures and engine performance improvements drive record earnings and shareholder returns. All that and more after this very short break.
मैं और आप कोई फर्क नहीं है हमें।
6 needed of the last ball.
जब ताक लेते हैं अपनी मंजिल को तो उसे पाने के लिए कमर तोड़ मेहनत करते हैं, पर कभी कभी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच
House is not in your budget, sir. Sorry.
रह जाता है एक फासला। खैर, मुझे उस फासले को मिटाने के लिए थोड़ी और मेहनत लगेगी, पर शुक्र है आपके पास है टाटा कैपिटल, जो मिटाए फासले आपकी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच। टाटा कैपिटल, मिटाए फासले।
What does it take to be the greatest in the world? Focus, wisdom, composure. But there is one thing which truly sets you apart. Your inner strength. So it is TMT Reebok, true inner strength.
Businesses are primarily in India known by their owners.
When you start a business, you don't realize how much you're putting the entire family at risk.
The trust is a big element.
And a typical symbol of trust is usually a banyan tree. And I used to, in my early days, wonder that how will a young company look like a banyan tree?
When you brought in this beauty product, Nykaa, you tried to make women look beautiful for themselves.
It's a message to women. Let the spotlight of your life be on you. And for that, we wanted her to be as confident as she wants.
India desperately needs that shift in mindset where women would be leading from the front.
They're risk takers and they do take open-ended risk, and a belief in yourself that you don't allow others to destabilize you and you keep pursuing your path.
Watch Radico presents Do Along with Paruntas Season 3 featuring Falguni Nair at these times on News 9. News 9, English news as it should be.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. I'm Shweta Kothari. In a major trade escalation, US President Donald Trump announced that his proposed 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada and its goods will take effect on 4th of March. But that's not all. Trump also threatened an additional 10% duty on Chinese imports, citing concerns over drugs flowing into US from these countries. Listen in.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that his proposed 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods will go into effect on March 4th as scheduled because of what he said were drugs flowing into the U.S. from those countries.
The drugs continue to pour into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of people. We're losing substantially more than 100,000 people. I mean, dead. They're dead. The families are destroyed after that happens.
Trump also said he would impose an additional 10% duty on Chinese goods on that day.
It's 10 plus 10. In
10
case,
plus 10
was there confusion on that?
There was, sir. Yeah.
Okay, 10 plus 10. It's a second 10.
Canadian and Mexican officials were due to meet with Trump administration counterparts in Washington on Thursday and Friday to try to forestall the tariffs, which could deal a serious blow to a highly integrated North American economy. Here's Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum.
The goal is to protect the trade treaty between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, and within this frame, see what actions to take to strengthen the three economies. So Mexican ministers in Washington have studied the matters thoroughly, and there have been previous discussions. So I hope we can reach an agreement, and on March 4th we can announce another thing.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country will have an immediate and extremely strong response if the U.S. imposes tariffs next week.
We will continue to do that work and do everything necessary to avoid these tariffs coming in. But like I said, if on Tuesday there are unjustified tariffs brought in on Canada, we will have an immediate and extremely strong response, as Canadians expect.
Trump's comments on the matter during his first cabinet meeting on Wednesday seem to suggest that he may push the deadline back for about 1 month until April 4th. Comments from Trump administration officials indicated that the April deadline was for Trump's reciprocal tariffs, matching import duty rates of other countries and offsetting their other restrictions. Beijing, in a letter to U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, said China and the United States should address concerns in economic and trade fields through equal dialogue and consultation.
And US President Donald Trump also targeted the European Union, accusing the bloc of taking advantage of the US on trade. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, Trump said his administration has decided to impose tariffs, which will be announced very soon, with a 25% duty on cars and other goods. Responding to Trump's announcement, European Commission warned that it would react immediately against what it called unjustified trade barriers.
We have made a decision. We'll be announcing it very soon, and it'll be 25%, generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada, different kind of case. They've really taken advantage of us in a different way. European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
And India has lowered tariffs on American bourbon imports from 150% to 100%, offering a much-needed boost to US whiskey distillers, making local buyers and industry experts happy. The move follows criticism from US President Donald Trump, who slammed what he called unfair levies in the Indian market.
India has reduced tariffs on American bourbon from 150% to 100%, much to the joy of whiskey importers and consumers. The tariff cut is set to benefit US whiskey distillers and comes after US President Donald Trump criticised, quote, unfair levies in the South Asian market. In a White House meeting with Indian leader Narendra Modi earlier this month, he expressed dissatisfaction with India's business climate for US companies. Trump has also proposed reciprocal tariffs on nations that impose duties on US imports. Sanjeet Kumar Paddy, CEO of International Spirits and Wines Association of India, is hopeful this move may trigger cuts on other imported spirits.
We expect that significant progress will be made because it benefits both the country. From a UK perspective, to get reduction in taxes into India, and from EU perspective as well as from an Indian perspective to get access to those markets.
Unlike many Asian countries where beer dominates, India is predominantly a whiskey drinking nation. At a liquor store, consumer Deepak Agarwal said lower prices will help the bourbon segment make inroads in the country's alcohol market.
The prices will be lower and it will be easy to buy for everyone. And maybe if we'll be going to have a scotch and everything, so we will have more choices and maybe more refined things to drink.
Many foreign liquor companies such as Diageo and Pernod Ricard operate in India's $35 billion spirits market. Industry executives have often criticised India's high tariff regime for such imports.
And US President Donald Trump has also dismissed calls for military support to Ukraine, saying instead that a minerals deal with Kyiv is the security guarantee it needs against Russia. His comments came on Thursday after British Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged Washington to commit to military assistance. But Trump ignored the request, showing a change in his approach to Ukraine's defense.
U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States and Britain were negotiating a bilateral trade agreement during a White House visit from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday.
We're going to have a great trade agreement. One way or the other, we're going to end up with a very good trade agreement for both countries. And we're working on that as we speak.
The deal could help avoid U.S. tariffs, which Trump said the Prime Minister tried to talk him out of.
He tried. He was working hard, I'll tell you that. He earned whatever the hell they pay him over there. But he tried.
At one point during the press conference, a reporter asked the two leaders about Trump's threats to impose tariffs on other countries in March, including Canada, which Trump has said he wanted to annex as the 51st U.S. state.
You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you.
Differences over Ukraine emerged during the press conference, with Trump saying that a minerals deal with Ukraine was close, brushing aside a plea from Starmer for a commitment of more U.S. military support.
My concern is that if there's a deal, and I hope there is a deal, that it must be a lasting deal, that it's not a temporary measure, and that is why I think it's really important that Putin knows that this deal, a historic deal, which I very much hope comes about, is there, and it's a lasting deal, and that we're able to deal with any inclination he has to go again or go further.
I think we'll have two deals. I think we'll have a deal on ending the war, and I think we're going to end up with a great trade deal with you. And it's an honor to be with you, and I want to thank everybody very much. Thank you very much.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in the US to finalize a rare earth minerals deal, one he says is crucial to securing American support. Speaking ahead of his White House visit, Zelensky said that the success of the deal depends on their conversation with President Trump. Meanwhile, President Trump in a cabinet meeting called it a very big agreement, saying it includes rare earth minerals and more. According to sources, the deal is central to Ukraine's efforts to maintain US backing, especially as Trump pushes for a swift resolution to the war with Russia. Remember, the agreement follows heated exchange between Trump and Zelensky. Just last week, Trump called Ukrainian leader an unpopular dictator who needed to make peace quickly or risk losing his country. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned Western allies and elites against trying to sabotage a potential improvement in US-Russia relations. Speaking to the FSB security service on Thursday, Putin said that early contacts with new American administration were encouraging and showed a willingness to restore diplomatic ties. He praised what he called a pragmatic approach from Washington, contrasting it with past administrations that he accused of making global tensions worse. However, Putin also cautioned that not everyone supports closer ties between the two nuclear powers and vowed to use Russia's diplomats and intelligence services to counter any efforts to derail the progress. And Wall Street took a hit on Thursday as major indexes tumbled, led by a sharp drop in chipmaker Nvidia. The AI giant's latest quarterly report fell flat and failed to spark enthusiasm in the market, sending its shares lower.
U.S. stocks sold off on Thursday, with the Dow losing nearly 0.5%, the S&P 500 plunging roughly 1.6%, and the Nasdaq spiraling almost 2.8%, its biggest one-day percentage drop in a month. Weighing on the indexes, shares of Nvidia, which tumbled 8.5%, evaporating $274 billion in stock market value. The plunge came a day after the AI chip leader gave a weaker than expected quarterly forecast for gross margin that overshadowed an upbeat revenue outlook. Ben McMillan is Chief Investment Officer and co-founder at IDX Advisors.
So the takeaway is the fundamentals are still very strong, but there's definitely some investor concern around slowing growth, shrinking margins, especially when you've got valuations at these levels.
NVIDIA stock has now fallen almost 20% from its record high close on January 6th. Fellow chipmaker Broadcom dropped more than 7%, and Advanced Micro Devices shed 5%. In other stock moves, shares of Salesforce lost 4% after the business software seller forecast fiscal 2026 revenue below expectations. And Warner Brothers Discovery jumped nearly 5% after saying it expects streaming profits to double this year. On the trade front, President Trump floated a 25% reciprocal tariff on European cars and other goods. He also said tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go into effect on Tuesday. Investors are now focused on monthly personal consumption expenditure data, which is the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge, due on Friday.
Mercedes-Benz is making big changes in China as the luxury car maker is reportedly cutting jobs as part of a plan to slash workforce cost by 25% in its largest market by 2027. The move comes as competition in China's auto market heats up with local EV makers challenging global giants.
Sources say Mercedes-Benz is cutting jobs in China to achieve its goal of reducing by a quarter workforce costs in its biggest market by 2027. The German luxury car maker announced further cost-cutting globally as it warned last week that 2025 earnings would be significantly lower. It comes amid price competition in China and rising global trade tensions. The source added that Mercedes told staff at its sales and finance subsidiaries in China on Tuesday that it would let go of around 10 to 15% of employees in these units. The company is also reportedly planning similar job cuts at other departments, such as IT and legal, later this year. Mercedes-Benz has around 5,000 employees in China. It did not immediately reply to a request for comment. In China, Mercedes-Benz, along with many other established foreign automakers, has taken a battering in sales in recent years. They've lost out to local rivals such as BYD in the hyper-competitive electric vehicle and hybrid segment.
Britain's Rolls-Royce is aiming higher, lifting its midterm target as confidence grows in its profit outlook. The company says its efforts to improve engine performance and cut costs are paying off, helping it surpass expectations last year. More details in this report.
Britain's Rolls-Royce lifted its midterm targets Thursday. Confidence for the future comes after the firm beat expectations last year with a profit of $3.1 billion. That was up 55% on the year before. Rolls-Royce, which works with plane makers Boeing and Airbus, said a cost-saving plan boosted profits. It further said it was helped by engine tweaks to ensure they can fly for longer before maintenance, and it had secured improved contract terms. The aerospace giant said it would meet its previous midterm targets this year, 2 years earlier than planned. It guided to midterm underlying operating profit of up to around $4.9 billion. The upgrade showed the progress made by Rolls-Royce since Tufan Ergin-Bilgic took over as CEO 2 years ago. At the time, he said the company was a burning platform in need of a turnaround. The company also announced a dividend on Thursday and launched a $1.27 billion share buyback. Investors were happy with what they heard and shares jumped 19% to hit an all-time high.
Amazon is giving Alexa a major upgrade. For the first time in over a decade, the voice assistant is getting a complete overhaul powered by generative AI. Amazon is betting big on AI to stay ahead in the virtual assistants race. But will this upgrade be enough to compete with ChatGPT and Google's Gemini? Take a look.
Amazon has launched an AI-powered version of its Alexa voice assistant after repeated development delays. At an event Wednesday night in New York, company Senior Vice President Panos Panay called it your friendly, know-it-all sidekick.
She's been trained in a couple of different ways, from EQ to humor to understanding. So what that means is she checks my tone, She brings a nice tone back. She understands I'm a little bit nervous. She's trying to calm me. It's kind of a great conversation. Also recognizes the environment around us.
Alexa was first introduced a decade ago. Amazon has since ploughed billions into the product, hoping it will drive sales for its main e-commerce website. It says some 500 million gadgets connected to Alexa are already in consumer hands. But many people use them for little more than setting timers and checking the weather, and Alexa has so far been a money-losing venture for the tech giant. Amazon boss Andy Jassy says developers have thought hard about how to make the new version more useful.
How are you actually using this new generative AI revolution to make Alexa meaningfully better? And so our team has been working on this for several months. I've had a chance to use it for the last several weeks. It is really remarkable in my opinion.
Dubbed Alexa Plus, the new bot is free for Amazon Prime members and $19.99 per month for everyone else. The service will become available to some users in March, before gradually rolling out more widely. Besides being able to read the room, Amazon says Alexa Plus can chat with users and respond to multiple prompts in sequence, not just one question at a time. The launch comes after delays driven by concerns over the speed and quality of responses. Amazon executives have admitted battling to eliminate so-called hallucinations, when bots deliver fabricated answers.